What do organizations need to do to come out of a cyber incident with minimal impact?
No organization is hack proof, but at the same time, it is important for organizations to have a very strong incident response infrastructure and writing the SOP to kind of actually testing and seeing that, actually inducing an attack in the environment, simulating an attack to see how robust the environment is, and post which, if there are any issues, then those issues should be fixed. That's called as the readiness check, right? Second is the communication part. So at point in time when there is an attack or an incident within the organization, who do you really need to communicate to? So of course, as I mentioned, there is a response to CERT which needs to happen within 6 hours when the incident has been identified.
Yes.
But apart from that, the regulators have to be informed, the stakeholders have to be informed. In some organizations, we've seen even SEBI was informed, and this is public news. And then of course, the board also has to be informed, and then the stakeholders, that means the customers.
Hello and welcome to CIO News. This is Afreen Khan, your host for the broadcast and Head of Operations at CIO News. Along with me, I have Mr. Akshay Garkel, who is the partner and leader for cyber at Grand Thornton Bharat. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for calling me, Afreen.
It's a pleasure to have you. So in our discussion today, Mr. Garkel, what I really wanted to understand is, what is the country's cyber landscape looking like for the financial services industry?
Right. As we are aware that, today the digital inclusion in our country is really growing, and obviously from a financial services standpoint, we have customer data, we have the finance information, we have a lot of KYC information that needs to be protected, and obviously financial services as an industry is highly regulated. We have the RBI, IRDA, SEBI and other regulators essentially, who are who have released a lot of directives, circulars, and against those circulars, it is important for the respective financial services sector business to kind of comply. So from that standpoint, I would say that there is a fair amount of method to madness available, and of course we know that the cyber incidents are, there is one cyber incident reported every 5 seconds, right? So from that perspective, the cyber attack surface is also increased. We've also seen that business digitalization has seen a transformation. So for example, there is a digital inclusion in most of the businesses to improve customer experience, to improve employee experience, people experience, and of course ecosystem experience, right? Also time to market is very important. So from that standpoint, how do you kind of build efficiencies by having digital assets, and then for various processes those digital assets essentially are used. So from that perspective, while there's so much of sophistication happening in the financial services domain, we've also seen that the complexity and the challenges are also increasing.
Yes.
Again, from that standpoint, it gets imperative for financial services organizations to be not one but multi steps ahead in terms of how the hacking attempts are happening versus how they are actually applying the safeguards. We've seen wherever a cyber incident happens, it is important for the financial services organization to report that incident within 6 hours to certain from the time the incident has been identified, and then of course also look at various other aspects of how do they basically come out of that incident in a way that there is minimal impact. Now in terms of what's the overall posture from a cyber perspective, yes, the attacks are increasing, the attack surface is increasing, and organizations are taking every step to make sure that whether it is on technology, whether it is on process, whether it is on regulatory perspective, compliance, or even the people aspect, right? But of course no organization is hack proof, right, as we all know. But what are the controls that one can apply to make sure that there is minimal impact
Correct.
out of an incident?
Yes. So when we know for a fact that there's so much of data that is that's there in the financial services domain, plus as you said, customers KYC, plus their financial data, and also the attacks are increasing every 5 seconds as an attack which is being reported. So and there are directives which are introduced. So what are the regulators doing
So I can tell you, our country's regulations are one of the most mature regulations in the world today, and regulators are thinking maybe multi steps ahead of what today's attack ecosystem is all about. That may not necessarily be very smooth for the functioning of the business, but at the same time it is imperative and important, because the
Correct,
moment
yes.
there is an incident which happens in an environment, then it will automatically put brakes to the business.
Yes.
Right. So from that standpoint, today regulators essentially are dwelling into continuous trainings. They are expecting even the board to be cyber aware.
Yes.
They are expecting the top management to be cyber aware, and they do appreciate the fact that cyber security is not the CISO's problem alone, right?
Yes, it
So
is a shared responsibility ultimately.
it's a shared responsibility.
Yes.
And from that standpoint, there are detailed directives. There are reports which come in are expected to be submitted on timely basis. Security testing is something that is important for every organizations to go through.
Yes.
The regulators also do not keep the regulations point in time, but they continuously evolve, and the ask is to kind of be one step ahead of today's time.
Yes.
And of course, with different models of businesses, for example, we've seen the fintech, we've seen digital lending, we've seen insurance companies essentially becoming insurtech.
Yes.
A lot of insurance companies are getting lightweight. That means you can actually, and they started the digital shelving. That means you can actually go to any of these e-commerce sites and probably go and buy an insurance.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So with all of that coming in, it is important that the regulations from a cyber standpoint also have to be apt and tight to the level where it is required.
So, Mr. Garkel, what I wanted to understand is, organizations in the financial services industry, they are categorized as critical infrastructure. So, what do such organizations need to do as additional steps?
Right. So, it's not only organizations in the financial services, but otherwise as well. There are organizations which contribute to the economy of the country, or the overall safety and security from an economic perspective as well. We have NCIIPC, which is National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, which essentially has released certain directives for these organizations to follow. Now, from a cyber standpoint, it is important for them to essentially have board buy-ins, have a very strong and robust internal audit structure from a cyber perspective. There is a threat monitoring which needs to be done on regular basis. Then of course the training and awareness, right? While having said that, the regulators are also asking for the same thing, but there is a separate submission which basically goes to NCIIPC, and those reports are tabled and the audits are conducted, and specific reviews are done, and to see whether those points are being complied to or not.
True. And I think when you come to such organizations, also what I wanted to understand is, what do organizations need to do? As we mentioned that if there's a cyber attack that happens or a cyber incident that happens, so what do organizations need to do to come out of a cyber incident with minimal impact?
So generally, as I mentioned earlier as well, that no organization is hack proof, but at the same time it is important for organizations to have a very strong incident response infrastructure. And the infrastructure, what I mean is, right from writing the SOP to kind of actually testing and seeing that actually inducing an attack in the environment, simulating an attack to see how robust the environment is, and post which if there are any issues, then those issues should be fixed. That's called as the readiness check, right? Second is the communication part. So at point in time when there is an attack or an incident within the organization, who do you really need to communicate to? So of course, as I mentioned, there is a response to CERT which needs to happen within 6 hours when the incident has been identified.
Yes.
But apart from that, the regulators have to be informed, the stakeholders have to be informed, In some organizations we've seen, even SEBI was informed, and this is public news. And then of course the board also has to be informed, and then the stakeholders, that means the customers, right?
Yes.
And that's extremely important.
Yes. So, when we are looking at passing on information, and when we are particularly talking about incident monitoring, because that's how you can actually preempt an attack, because you track the overall anomaly of the systems and how the traffic is behaving, how consumers are behaving. So, how sophisticated do these incident monitoring mechanisms need to be?
Yeah. So today, the attackers are very smart. We just spoke about touchless attacks. What that means is you really don't need to click on a link for that particular malicious file to come into your environment, right? For example, Pegasus. So from that standpoint, obviously there needs to be a fair degree of automation. There has to be a preemption in terms of understanding that how a particular malicious file is going to be sitting, and what's the nature and the anatomy of that particular file, and then of course build systems around it to kind of detect, and not only detect but also respond to that attack. That means either you block the file, you delete the file, or you quarantine the file, and so on and so forth. Now, having said that, many times what we've seen as a trend today is that the attack does not happen on day one of the existence of the malicious file, or the specific issue that happens within the environment, but it is basically a very solid 3 to 6 months where the information is being collected. Third party contract information, your personal identifiable information, anything which is critical to the organization. Once that is collected and ported out, then the organization is held to ransom, right? Because in some cases, not all critical infrastructure would be encrypted. It would be only a 10 or a 15% or a 20% sample.
Correct. Yes.
Which is again easy to retrieve, because if you have very strong backup policies and you have strong resilience from a cyber standpoint, you can basically restore the servers. But what you can't restore is the information that has already gone out.
Yes.
And if that is available in public domain, it is published in public domain, then there is a brand reputation threat. There is also a threat from a legal proceeding standpoint, because you may be tearing the agreement, right?
Out, yes.
And there is third parties can sue you. And at the same time, last but not the least is the trust factor of your end customers, right? And if you're a financial services organization, then it is even a bigger threat.
Very, very true, because ultimately customers, and as we know that anything related to finance is very, very critical. So protecting that information, ensuring that it is stored in a foolproof manner is very, very essential.
Right.
Yes. So Mr. Garkel, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all of that.
Thank you for having me over.
And just to conclude our session, we just like to know that there's this survey that CIO News is actually conducting, and so according to you, what specific trends do you see coming in the next couple of years in the BFSI and the fintech industry?
So as I mentioned, digital inclusion is something, artificial intelligence, and I think the way AI is building up, it's moving very rapid. I think what is really important to see is the ethical usage of AI.
Yes.
That is something that I keep talking about wherever I speak in sessions or in any forums. And at the same time also, looking at bewaring of all those Ponzi schemes, etc. We've seen that people are getting harassed. When you basically even pick up 20,000-30,000 rupees as loan on those micro loan sites and applications, basically people get threatened.
Yes.
For repayments and things like that, and higher rate of cloud adoption. I think that's going to be where a lot of information is going to be produced and everything going to be on the cloud. Quantum computing, because when you talk about volume of data,
yes,
it is important that the processing of that information and availability of the information at your fingertip is very important. And AI is going to play a big role here, because preempting what is the request, preempting what could be the request is something that AI can predict, and from a predictive analysis perspective give the experience. We also spoke about hyper experience.
Yes.
And hyper experience is going to be another area where obviously there is going to be a line drawn from a touch and feel perspective, but how you can actually exemplify the experience is going to be something which is going to be an upcoming trend. And I think from a user experience standpoint, improving the customer experience through technology is going to be the next need of the hour.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Mr. Garkel. And it was really nice having this discussion with you. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you for having me.